I graduated college in 2008. Looking back, that was probably the worst possible year in modern history to walk into a career in finance. I had what I thought was a pretty good landing spot lined up. I'd been interning, and I had what I felt like a real connection to a large Wall Street firm, one of the big names everybody knew. The kind of firm a kid from a small southern town doesn't usually get a shot at. But that firm ended up being one of the names right in the middle of the crisis. And by the time I graduated, hiring was frozen, so that door closed. I was 22, fresh out of school with a double major in business and accounting, wondering if I'd picked the wrong field at exactly the wrong time. I was fortunate though. A company took a chance on me. They didn't pay me much, but they said, if you'll put in the work, we'll back you. And the work meant putting on a suit that was about 2 sizes too big, grabbing a bag of pamphlets, and building a practice from scratch by knocking on doors in small South Carolina towns. If you're graduating this year, or you've got a kid about to, I want to tell you what that stretch taught me. Because what's happening right now isn't 2008. But if you're young and trying to start something, it probably feels close enough. My name is Kyle Blackwell. I'm a certified financial planner. I've spent almost 2 decades sitting with families working through their money. And I still do that work. But a few years ago, I started building something on the side called Purpose Path, a financial stewardship program for young adults. It's the thing I wish someone had handed me when I was the one walking across the stage. This video is for the graduate, but honestly, it's also for the parent or the pastor or the campus director watching with a specific young adult in mind. I want to give you the version of this talk I would have needed coming out of school. The one I'd give if I could go back and sit down with my younger self over a cup of coffee. But then again, I didn't drink coffee, so maybe something different. The first thing I'd tell my younger self is something I wish someone had told me at the time, which is that when the plan you had isn't available anymore, that's not actually the problem. The problem is what you do next. Let me paint the picture for you. I was 22, looked closer to 16, and I was forever grateful that doorbell cameras weren't really a thing yet. Because if people could have watched me walk up to their porch, half of them would have assumed I was selling candy bars for the local high school. 90-degree heat in upstate South Carolina summer, stylishly oversized suit, dragging myself around cul-de-sacs asking for 5 minutes of somebody's time. I learned some things the hard way out there. One was, don't turn your back on growling dogs. I've got a ripped pair of old pants to prove that one. Another one was, don't let one bad interaction ruin your whole day. I once knocked on the door of a man who threatened to shoot me and mocked me off his porch. I didn't quit that afternoon. I walked a few houses down and ended up meeting one of my best long-term clients. But the bigger lesson, the one I think actually matters for somebody who's young and wondering how to start, is this. The plan I had coming out of school wasn't available to me anymore. The Wall Street door had closed, and nobody was going to come find me. I was either going to sit and wait for a better opening, or I was going to go do the unglamorous version of the work I wanted to do. I picked the unglamorous version, and I'm grateful I did. Because honestly, the people who were willing to do the work that wasn't impressive ended up being the ones who built something. The people who waited for the right opening, in a lot of cases, are still waiting. If you're graduating right now and the plan you had is coming apart, that's hard. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. But the work that's actually available to you, even if it's not what you pictured, that work counts. Doing it well counts. And doing it long enough that you're good at it counts more than almost anything else early on. The second thing I'd tell my younger self is that your identity is going to try to hide inside your paycheck, and nobody's going to warn you about it. I actually saw this in other people before I saw it in myself. Out there knocking on doors, you naturally gravitate toward the big houses. Luxury cars in the driveway, corner lot in the new development. That's where the money is, right? At least that's what the 22-year-old me thought. Turns out, not even close. I met plenty of executives with negative net worth. Country club membership, 2 leased luxury cars, and a mortgage they couldn't quite afford. I met young doctors still buried in student loans, doing everything they could to look the part. The high incomes were landing. They were just already spoken for before the deposit even cleared. And then I'd knock on a modest house a few streets over. Older siding, well-worn Toyota in the driveway. And those folks, a lot of times, were the ones who had actually figured it out. They gave generously. They lived on less than they made. They had no car payments. Some of them, if not most of them, had paid off homes. So early on, I had this sense that whatever wealth actually was, it didn't look the way I'd assumed. But knowing something intellectually and actually living it are two very different things. And it took me about a decade to learn that the hard way. Here's what happened. My wife and I built financial comfort pretty quickly. We were competitive, driven, and naturally frugal. We paid off debt, we saved, we traveled. From the outside, it all looked like the right kind of progress. And for a while it was. Then comparison crept in. One day my wife came home and said, "Hey, have you seen so-and-so's house? He must make a ton." I knew for a fact I made more money than him, but his house was nicer than ours. So a year or two later, we bought a bigger one. A pool, way too many bedrooms and bathrooms, a bounce house. Yes, a bounce house in one of the spare rooms that I'm pretty sure nobody touched for 6 months. And one afternoon I stood in our basement, just kind of staring into those empty rooms we couldn't even fill. And the weight of it really hit me. What was I doing? What was I chasing? Whatever it was, it hadn't paid off. I felt empty, and I knew I couldn't keep doing it. Around that same time, a seasoned advisor I respected said something to me that I'm still grateful for today. He told me, "You've been given a gift. Don't waste it. Steward it. Not for your own comfort, but to serve other people." That was the hinge. We sold the big house and moved into a smaller one that actually fit our family. I started volunteering with a group that plays adaptive pickleball, coming alongside people with special needs. And work became something I enjoyed again because it stopped being about me. If you're early in your career, the temptation isn't going to show up as a house yet. It's going to show up as a car, an apartment upgrade, a title, a following, a neighborhood. It's going to whisper that if you can just get the next thing, you'll feel satisfied. You'll feel settled. You won't. I lived it. The next thing doesn't settle anything. That's why everything I teach now starts with identity before income. Not as a tagline, although I use it quite often. It's just the only foundation I've ever seen that actually holds up under financial pressure. The third thing I'd say is that the boring stuff is where the real returns are. And I don't think anybody really wants to hear that when they're young, but it's true. When you're starting out, you want excitement. You want the big move, the big deal, the story you can tell later. What actually made the difference in my life wasn't a big move. It was a handful of small, boring habits that compounded quietly over 20 years. Things like automatic savings, setting it as a percentage of every paycheck, not a dollar amount. So it grew with my income. Giving first before anything else cleared the account, even when I didn't have much to give. I think that's the single simplest habit I know for keeping money from owning you. Living on less than I made, even when I could have afforded more. That margin is the difference between panic and peace when something unexpected happens. And in 20 years, plenty unexpected has happened. Avoiding consumer debt. I never bought a car new because of the depreciation that hits the second you drive it off the lot. I'd just keep driving the car I had until I'd saved up enough cash for the next one. That one habit, repeated over 2 decades, is worth more than I think most people realize. None of that is exciting, I know. None of it shows up on social media. But stacked over 20 years, those habits are basically the reason I can build what I'm building right now. Without them, I'd still be chained to a production number somewhere. But you're early in life. The part I want you to hold on to is this. You don't have to figure everything out this year, but the boring habits are way easier to start now before life gets expensive than they are to install later when you've already built a lifestyle around not having them. Your future self will be grateful in ways you genuinely can't see yet. The world is going to tell you a lot of things about money in your 20s, and most of it is going to be tactics. Buy this, invest in that, start this side hustle, optimize this. I'm not saying tactics are bad. I'm saying tactics without identity don't really hold up. Anyone can budget for a month. Not everyone can hold the line when their friends are upgrading their apartments, posting their vacations, and you're driving the same car you had in college. So the real question coming out of school isn't really what's your plan for money. It's more like, who are you when the numbers are good? And who are you when they aren't? I wrote a book about that question called Purpose in Every Paycheck. Honestly, it's the book I wish someone had handed me at 22, when I was standing on stage with a diploma I wasn't sure I'd ever use. Links in the description. Thanks for being here. I'll see you on the next one.